I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Elena Nadolinski, CEO and founder of Ironfish. Elena, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Excited to dive into Layer 1 networks, ZK, privacy, very hot topics, and a very important infrastructure and piece of blockchain, bringing it to the mainstream and the next level of real-world adoption. I know you and your team have been working hard on this network for quite a while, and excited to dive into it. I'd love to start off our conversation together by just, first of all, hearing a little bit on your background in blockchain and tech and how that led to starting Ironfish, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Yeah, I was a software engineer at Airbnb in 2017, and I'm here in the Bay Area. So a friend of mine invited me to a dinner at Protocol Labs house in Palo Alto, and it was an incredible experience because 30, 40 person dinner, and everyone there was talking about Ethereum. Ethereum just hit $30. They were all psyched. And I remember Googling on the car ride back, like, what is Ethereum? I heard of Bitcoin before, but not of Ethereum. And a couple of months later, the very first Ethereum hackathon was announced, ETH Waterloo, at University of Waterloo. And I decided to go, and it was an amazing experience. Everybody who was early in the space were there. Like Vitalik and his dad were there, MakerDAO were there, the MetaMask team, they were there. Pretty much everybody in the space were there. And I remember, working on my hackathon at 3:30 a.m. and I can't get my MetaMask integration to work. And so Dan Finlay helps me with my MetaMask integration at like 3:30 a.m. And it was kind of like this really great experience of like, wow, not only is this industry early and could potentially be as revolutionary as the internet, the community is so incredibly open and welcome that 9 out of 10 times, if you have a question about a certain product, you can go talk to the person that invented the thing, and they will reply or help you or at least point you in the right direction. And so that felt pretty special to me. And so that's basically how I got into crypto. After that hackathon, started going to more hackathons, eventually giving talks, just really falling down the crypto rabbit hole, and eventually decided to quit my job at Airbnb and decided to focus on crypto full time. And so the way I thought about it is I kind of work backwards. Let's just assume that crypto is going to be the next payment paradigm system. What are we missing today? And privacy was by far the biggest gap. Privacy is technically hard, it's regulatory hard, but it's necessary. The way we have crypto working today is way too transparent. I think if you explain how transparent crypto is today to anyone who's not familiar with with how crypto works, they're just aghast. Like, it's kind of a Twilight Zone episode where everything you do is out in the public. Everything you buy, everything you interact with, potential friends you might have, like messages you might send, everything is just fully out in the open. And so, my thesis was crypto is here to stay. Zero knowledge proofs are here to stay, and privacy is a must for this payment system to keep going. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty much the birth of Ironfish. We started like late 2018, 2019. The code base is a lot younger than that. It was a nonlinear path, but we're finally to a point where we are getting ready to mainnet launch. So it was a long journey, but we finally got there.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Great backstory, Elena, and smart move quitting Airbnb to get into blockchain. Sounds like a no-brainer now in hindsight, and I'm sure you're having a lot of fun with it. Now, I really love what you and your team are prioritizing in terms of privacy and ZK, and I've spoken to a few ZK-based projects recently, and they're touting that ZK could be as big as blockchain itself. It is really important if we're going to have adoption of the general consensus. And you're right about the transparency it's almost too transparent. I send you $5 and all of a sudden you can see in my entire bank account.
Yeah.
Which is crazy when you think about it. But it's been running like that for years already, and improvements are being made. A lot's happened since Ethereum was $30 when you first heard about it. Now there's all these different layer 1 and layer 2 networks, and starting to incorporate more privacy, which is great. Now I want to dive into Ironfish and how exactly that works and the privacy aspect of it. So say for example, the viewers they're familiar with Ethereum and they've heard of some of these other scaling networks or alternative networks, but they don't know too much. How would you explain what Ironfish is in relation to that?
Yeah, so we think of Ironfish as a privacy platform or a privacy layer for other crypto assets. So Ironfish at its core is its own new layer 1. It is proof of work, and all transactions are encrypted, meaning that they are private. It does not have smart contracts, but we did enable custom assets. And the reason we did that is so that bridge operators could bridge Ironfish to something like Ethereum to allow users to carry over their funds from Ethereum onto Ironfish and use Ironfish as the privacy layer for other crypto assets. So we think of Ironfish as a very collaborative layer. It's not a layer 2, it is its own layer 1, which gives us flexibility to actually bridge to multiple chains at once and have a singular anonymity set that can hold multiple assets. So we really think of Ironfish as a very collaborative project between other layer 1s.
Okay. So say, for example, I had some Ethereum, I wanted to send it to my friend. Would I start with Ethereum on Ether and then bridge that to Ironfish and then send it to him all the privacy functionality would ensure that nobody else can see that transaction? Or how exactly would that work if you walked me through that?
That's exactly how it would work, yeah. So you would first have to bridge your Ethereum onto Ironfish. You would have a wrapped Ether on Ironfish. And then you could send, swap, store it completely privately. So we kind of view Ironfish as the plumbing of crypto. Like that is our goal of making it the plumbing of crypto. Like you and I are using something called HTTPS right now, which in the 90s was a super controversial tech because it was the strongest encryption that we had. And now you would be hard pressed to find a website that doesn't use it. But you don't have to think about it. Like you don't think about like, oh, is Zoom using HTTPS or is the website that I'm logging into using HTTPS? You just use the technology and you're guaranteed some level of privacy from, the onlooking third, like middleman eyes. And so we kind of view Ironfish's end goal as being that of people sending assets to and from one another, interacting with different protocols in a way that preserves the person's privacy, but they don't necessarily need to know that it's going through something like Ironfish, for instance. So we're ways out from that world. There's a lot of integrations and seamless experiences that we have to build. But that's kind of like the end goal that we see for Ironfish is like a very fundamental Lego piece of crypto that kind of protects the person's privacy, since most transparent chains don't have that right now. Yeah, no,
it seems like it's a ways out. We're still a ways out of just general adoption of Ethereum transactions and stuff like that. But hopefully, these kind of privacy technologies can make it a better, more user-friendly experience to get new people into Web3 as well. And speaking of ways out, I know that your team's been working on this for many years already, and from what I understand, part of the main launch is in the very near future. Could you talk about what you guys have done so far, and what are the next steps to get there?
Yeah, so we ran testnet for over a year, which is probably one of the longest testnets. We definitely shipped the product early so we can get feedback from users as quickly as possible. And we had 3 testnet phases, and every single testnet phase kind of had a goal in mind of what we wanted to test and how we wanted to engage and grow our community. So the first testnet phase is we wanted to see if miners would be interested in participating in the Ironfish ecosystem. The second testnet phase, we really wanted to stress test Ironfish. So we incentivized node uptime and people sending transactions. And so in that time frame, we had almost 40 million transactions being sent on Ironfish testnet, which is pretty incredible because every single transaction has multiple zero knowledge proofs. So we process more zero knowledge proofs than like pretty much any other chain, which is kind of incredible. And then the third testnet phase, we really wanted to stress test the multi-asset feature, so people could create assets and they were incentivized by those actions so we can see if there's any nefarious activity happening. And so the third testnet, which is the final testnet, had 60,000 nodes online, which is pretty incredible. The second testnet phase had 11,000 nodes, and just for comparison, Bitcoin is roughly like 10 to 20,000, depending on, price of Bitcoin and interest. So that was really incredible to see. So we closed the third testnet a couple of weeks ago, and we are working really hard towards mainnet launch. Right now, mainnet launch is April 20th, so 4/20, and the team is working really hard to hit that deadline. And knock on wood, but so far so good. So super excited to get that going. The first iteration of Ironfish, like the way we think about it is, this is the fundamental layer. So this is Ironfish as a layer 1. It has custom assets enabled. We're going to be working towards bridges post mainnet. So that's not something that people are going to be seeing on day 1, but we did that intentionally so that we can launch Ironfish, make sure it's stable, make sure the ecosystem growth is good, make sure that the chain activity is good and there's no nefarious activity and no like egregious bugs happening post mainnet, and then kind of build on top of that when we feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great to hear about the adoption on the testnet, the multiple testnets, and to have millions of transactions. And you mentioned there about having a ZK proof attached to the transactions. I'm curious if you can explain that a little bit, because some people, myself included, I don't think understand the full picture of when you send a transaction, there's also a ZK proof that's tied to it. And from what I understand, that has a zero knowledge sort of proof that the transaction is confirmed, but you don't need to know all the other, there's zero knowledge that's needed to know to understand that it's confirmed. But how does that sort of confirm and add value to the transaction, and what does it really mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we started in like 2018, people had this misconception that zero knowledge proofs almost equals privacy, because back then we only had projects like Zcash or Grin or Monero that were touching upon these concepts. And so people had this misconception that if you're using zero knowledge proof, that must mean you're dealing with privacy. And that's not true. Zero knowledge proofs are used to prove honest computation. Fast forward to today, I feel like when I talk about zero knowledge proofs, people's mind always jumps to scalability. Oh, you must be a scalable blockchain. And that's also not true, because again, zero knowledge proofs are used to prove honest computation. So they're a tool that you can use for different use cases. And there's so many other use cases that you can use them for. Like for instance, there are a couple of projects that are working on proof of reserves, like after the FTX collapse. How can an exchange prove that they're solvent without revealing all of their positions at once, right? Mm-hmm. So again, zero knowledge proofs are just a tool, and so they're used to prove honest computation, meaning that let's say a computer or a service has done a computation and has an output. A zero knowledge proof will allow a person to say this output was the result of this computation without me needing to see some details that went into that computation. For instance, the inputs of that computation. So that can be used for scalability. So I can say, I can aggregate, let's say 1,000 transactions, and this is the end result of people's balances, but you don't need to see the 1,000 steps, not because I'm trying to be private about it, but because I'm trying to compress how much data I show you so that on a layer 1, that transaction is cheaper. And we're using it for privacy. So for instance, I can say the transaction itself is encrypted. So if you're not part of the transaction, you cannot see the details of that transaction. But I can give you a zero knowledge proof saying that even though you cannot see the private details of the transaction, you can still be confident that the transaction is valid, meaning that, I'm spending funds that I have. I am who I say I am, even though you actually don't need to see any of those details. So zero knowledge proofs, again, are just a really powerful tool, and we're just now scratching the surface of what they can be used for. And they're still, fairly expensive to use in terms of, if you have a complex computation, that proof is going to take longer to generate. But there's so much academic explosion of making zero knowledge proofs more efficient. There's also a lot of hardware advancements that are happening right now to make proof generation and proof verification faster, which is super fascinating to see. So yeah, I think like right now there was a tagline, that you're not a Bitcoin maximalist or Ethereum maximalist, you're a ZKP maximalist. I think I'm probably in that camp because the technology itself is extremely cool.
Yeah, no, the potential for this to benefit, the privacy and scalability of all the networks, I feel like is huge. And I'm curious on your thoughts and, sort of industry-wide adoption of ZK in the next 2 years. Do you think it's something that, other blockchains and layer ones will be looking at Ironfish and being like, this is the technology that we should have in all blockchains?
Yeah, that's definitely our goal. So the way we're building Ironfish today is that every transaction has what's called descriptions, and descriptions are simply statements that are verified by zero knowledge proof. So we are using that to basically have private transactions. But the way we built Ironfish is very extensible. So we're kind of building Ironfish as this foundational layer that can process zero knowledge proofs. And so some of the ideas that we're thinking post mainnet are ones like, can we have a layer 2 ZK VM on top of Ironfish, because that would still fit the paradigm of a transaction is simply a set of descriptions that have zero knowledge proofs that a validator can verify. So that's kind of how we're thinking about Ironfish, as like this platform for zero knowledge proofs. And we started off with private transactions because it is by far, in my opinion, the most important thing that we can be building right now. But we're building it in a way that is backwards compatible with a lot of other ideas that we have moving forward.
Thank you for those insights, Elena. And you mentioned the mainnet launch is looking to be launched on 420. That's coming up pretty soon. I'm curious if there's people that want to get involved and they're not they don't understand how to run a node and all of this kind of stuff yet. But are there ways for people to get involved in the testnet or the community prior to the launch and prepare to use the platform right when it comes out?
Yeah, so we ended the third incentivized testnet, but the testnet itself is still running. You just, you can participate if you're curious about how Ironfish works, but you are not going to be part of the incentivized testnet anymore since that ended. But yes, you certainly can. So you can go to our Discord, you can join the community. We have, I think, something like 45,000 people in our Discord right now. You can run a node fairly easily. So our kind of mantra within the team is, how do we build the Apple of blockchains? Like if you open an Apple computer, it just runs out of the box. You don't need to install drivers. Everything just works seamlessly. That's how we think of Ironfish. So if you want to install a full node right now, it's npm install-g Ironfish, and there you go. You have Ironfish in your computer. If you want to run a node, it's just Ironfish start, and you have a node that is going to automatically connect and to the network and start syncing. So, every step of the way, we kind of really focus on usability. We are going to have a full wallet coming out post mainnet as well, again, to kind of lower the friction for people to participate in the Ironfish network. But yeah, our mantra has always been like, how do we make this as easy as possible for people to use? And even the installation process, we made it super, super easy. So if you want to try Ironfish today and figure out how to use it, obviously go to our website for all the documentation. Go to our Discord if you have any questions. All of our engineers are in the Discord, and they're answering questions all the time, especially now as we're getting closer to mainnet launch and people are genuinely curious how they can integrate with their systems. Please go to those channels. We also have a Twitter, Ironfish Crypto. But if you want to ask questions directly, I do recommend Discord.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elena. And I can leave those links in the description box below as well. And thank you for focusing on the user experience and making it easy. That's the biggest way that we can help bring more mainstream adoption to the technology so that the tech can actually, improve people's lives and make it better. It's all about the user experience and just having a good experience with this tech. So I do appreciate that focus, and I'm looking forward to the mainnet launch. I will be following along as well, and
awesome.
all the best with that, and let's follow up in the near future.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.